Hello, fish friends. I thought I'd share just a quick update video. I have a couple of angels today that surprisingly spawned. I was really surprised to see this. I bought these angels when they were probably a size of a quarter, probably March time frame now, so now we're in July. I was not expecting them to grow quite this fast. Angels obviously do grow fast. But obviously they've matured a little faster than I was expecting. And today when I woke up, I noticed they were being a little bit more aggressive, as you can see to the rest of the tank here. And surprisingly, there's a spawn there. So I'm going to try to zoom in so you guys can see. Obviously this is their very first spawn. You can see there the female is doing great and she's being awesome and being a great mom and looking after the eggs. My goal is just to leave them in the tank here. Given that it's a first spawn, I'm not expecting very much, if you will. I think it teaches good parenting behaviors. Plus, as you can see, it's a community tank, so the probability of the eggs actually surviving for a long time is pretty small. So we've got some pretty hungry Congo tetras and cardinal tetras in here as well. But I just wanted to share that because I thought it was really cool to see. It's always amazing to see when your fish suddenly spawn. It's a wonderful thing to see that they're happy and that they're healthy and that they're looking after their fry, or their soon-to-be fry, I should say, in terms of the eggs. So just great to see. And then I wanted to share just a little bit more about the substrate on this tank and kind of give an in-depth review of the substrate, because that's one of the things that I've been seeing a lot of questions about. So I have to say, first off, the water in the Seattle area is very soft. And so when it comes out of the faucet for me, the water is about 7.2 on the pH scale. And then after that, after about 24 hours of sitting in a bucket, basically, untreated and having some aeration applied to it, it drops down to about 6.8. And I suspect that's because the local water company basically is putting in some hardening, temporary hardness basically from carbonate in order to help it to transmit through the water facilities lines. But one of the things I noticed is that the water is really soft in Seattle to start off with. There's basically no KH in it and very little carbonate in it. Now, when I put this tank together, I was intending to keep this obviously with tetras in it. You can see there's some cardinal tetras and the Congo tetras in here as well as the angels. And so I wasn't really concerned that the pH was going to be low on the tank, but I knew I did want it to be a heavily planted tank, as you can see here. Now, the substrate in here is entirely Fluval Stratum. It's the first time I ever used Fluval Stratum, and it was just an experiment to see what it would be like as compared to using an ADA soil or another aqua soil that I was already familiar with. And I will say that the stratum has done really well, except in this case, maybe a little too well. And one of the reasons I say that is, if you're careful, you can actually spot at the bottom there that there's a bunch of shells that are on the ground. And those shells there on the ground, or on the substrate, I should say, are actually the snail shells from just pest snails. So regular ram's horn snails and, pond snails, bladder snails, etc. on there. Even those snails were not able to keep up with the lack of carbonate in this tank. I do add carbonate in terms of adding a wonder shell every couple of weeks or so when I do a water change. And I also do, behind the aquarium co-op filter that you can see there, I actually have a small bag of crushed coral as well, just in here to add some carbonate hardness. But even with those things, even what we consider the pest snails, were not able to keep up with the amount of pH reduction, essentially, the acidification of the water from a combination, obviously, of the soft water that I have here, but then, that Fluval Stratum. I have a pretty deep bed of stratum. You can see at the front here, it's a good couple to 3 inches thick, depending on where it is. And at the back, it's even thicker. So I did add, a number of bags in here. For reference, this is a 50-gallon tank. So it's approximately the same measurements as a 40 breeder. So it's, I think it's 36 by 18 by 20, I think is the measurements of it. So, that's kind of just there's a lot of stratum to put in here. I didn't augment the stratum with anything else, which I normally would do. And I would recommend, unless you really want that acidification of your tanks to happen. Now, if you have super hard water, this may be exactly what you're looking for. So if you're wanting your tetras to spawn, if you want your angelfish to spawn, etc., you know, that might be a great substrate for you. Otherwise, you can see from a plant growth perspective, with the light notwithstanding here, it's been really great from that perspective. So I have some crypts that are low light in the back here. I also have a couple of other, you know, I've got dwarf hairgrass, I've got a crinum in here, and then obviously some nymphaeas, etc. And then the rest are stem plants, which primarily feed from the water column. And so I don't do a lot of extra fertilization on this tank. It's really just supposed to be kind of a jungle and a dense planted tank. Not everybody likes that, so I realize that might not be your style, but that was my intention with this tank, and I'm very happy with the way it looks. And obviously the fish are happy because they're breeding too in it, so it's good to see. But I think with Fluval Stratum, you know, it's very clear to me that the pH drop that is expected, you know, we do expect that obviously when we add an aqua soil, it should be dropping your pH, but in this case I think it's really low. I will say that the tank itself, I'm not entirely sure what the pH is because it goes below what the API test kit, the Aquarium co-op test strips, and the Tetra test strips will actually measure. So, and as you can see, even the pest snails cannot keep their carbonate hardness of the shell intact with it. So perfect for tetras, perfect for angelfish and other things that require that low pH, and I actually prefer the acidified water, but really, you know, not something you want to think about if you have any kind of hardness, you know, requiring fish there. So that could be, you know, including rainbow fish, maybe, you know, obviously live bearers like guppies and platies, etc. as well. So just things to think about. I will say, you know, just from a looks perspective, I really do love the look of the Fluval Stratum. I will say that folks had warned me that, you know, maybe it would become muddy over time, that it may not look great, you know, as soon as you put it in the tank, it was going to turn into a mud and all this other thing. You can see I'm about 6 months into this stratum, and you can see actually that the substrate is still very much intact. You can still see that it's round sort of bowls, if you will, of the aqua soil. And so that part has worked well. And I have not noticed anything from a root perspective that requires attention there. I have not put additional root tabs in with these plants. I have done some water fertilization just in the water column, but I haven't added anything into the substrate as yet. So yeah, generally I think it's a positive investment with Fluval Stratum. It's a lot easier to get a hold of sometimes than some of the other aqua soils that are out there. And so I know that might be a consideration for a lot of folks too. I will say that I still probably prefer the ADA substrates as well as their Brightwell substrate, and I'll do some review videos on those as well. And the reason for my preference really is that with ADA, with the Amazonia version 2 in particular, I have found that to be such an awesome aqua soil in order to cycle the tank quickly at the beginning. It has some ammonia release, so you should definitely be aware of that, which I did not see with the Fluval Stratum, but I did see the pH crashing pretty quickly. And then I'm always concerned when I do the water change that, you know, is it really holding the pH in the way that I would expect? And so I would say, you know, plant growth wise, this is done pretty well for plants that don't require a huge amount of feeding from the substrate. I would say it's not been optimal as I see some of the crypts and other areas. Like I would probably augment that still with some root tabs. But overall, I would say if this is the aqua soil that you can get a hold of, you want to do a heavily planted tank for your fish, keep them happy, maybe manipulate your pH down a little bit more. So most of the places in the United States at least have hard water. And maybe if you're trying to, you know, make that lower and be able to keep fish that you normally might not be able to, or perhaps you're trying to keep, you know, caridina shrimp, etc., then I would say Fluval Stratum will work just great there as well. So I hope this helped you folks. I thought it was worth sharing here a little bit more about the angels that are spawning for the first time today, and also to talk a little just about what we're doing with the Fluval Stratum here. So thanks so much and happy fish keeping.